Welcome to the Around the Association podcast. I'm your host, Danny Thompson. Yes, I was recording something earlier today, but something happened and I lost my signal. So this is the first of two podcasts that's going to be recorded today. We're going to talk about some of the hottest topics in the NBA. And of course, let's start with the major topic over the last 24 hours, which has been the trade of Blake Griffin from the Los Angeles Clippers to the Detroit Pistons yesterday afternoon. You know, right around most folks' time in the Eastern time zone that was actually going home from work. The story broke that the Pistons had put Avery Bradley in trading block. That Adrian Wojnarowski reported that the Clippers and Pistons were on a verge of a blockbuster deal that would send Griffin to the Detroit Pistons. Now, when you look at this on paper, you're wondering why the Clippers, a team that's 25 and 24, trading their all-star, type power forward, the face of the franchise, the guy that really brought the Clippers back into relevancy when he was drafted with number one pick years ago, six-time All-Star, dunk champion, the guy known for jumping over cars and having the personality to bring the Clippers to the point where, let's just be honest with you, out in Los Angeles, the Clippers are the better team than the team that's in the purple and gold. You trade Griffin away months after they traded Chris Paul, months after you gave Griffin a $180 million extension to basically, in his eyes, thought he was going to be a Clipper for life. That's what they mentioned on his recruiting visit to stay in LA. He didn't really look at any other teams. And now, 7 months later, he's now going to Detroit, changing all those warm weather for actual big coats and being part of the Motor City. So if you look at the deal on the table that's set for both teams, the Pistons acquired Blake Griffin along with young forward Bryce Johnson as well as Willie Reed. They're all going to Detroit. The Clippers receive in return Avery Bradley, who I mentioned earlier, Tobias Harris, Boban Marjanovic, and 2 draft picks. A first-round pick this year that's heavily protected, the top 3. Otherwise, they have protections going on past the 2018 draft, as well as a second-round pick. So in this podcast, we're going to talk about actually what it means for both teams. Now, if you look at the side for the LA Clippers and what they acquire one of the best defensive two-way guards in the entire league in Avery Bradley. Take away the shooting numbers because he struggled in Detroit this year. Bradley was having one of the best seasons, had a career season last year in Boston under Brad Stevens and playing with Isaiah Thomas. He averaged right around 17 points a game, shot right around 47% from the floor. Was a humongous. He had a lot of big threes and also was one of the NBA leaders in three-pointers and three-point percentage in the first quarter. So he always got to very, very good starts, especially from deep. Besides that, on the offensive side of the game, Bradley's one of the best on-ball defenders in the entire league, and it's just going all the way around. Now, what does that do for the Clippers? Now, Patrick Beverley is out for the rest of the season, but if Beverley does come back, the same Pat Beverley that we always know that's irritating, that's just a pest on defense. You put him and Bradley together, if Bradley does resign in June, in the offseason, you have the best set of defensive guards in the entire league, guys who can lock down other teams' guard duos, especially in the Western Conference, where you have the Splash Brothers, you have Portland's dynamic duo, you have Jimmy Butler, and you have and Jeff Teague out in Minnesota. You have a multitude of guards in other places. Even in Houston, if Chris Paul decides to stay, him and James Harden, you have 2 guys who can guard those 2 guys. I'm not saying shutting down Harden and shutting down Jimmy Butler, but it makes it much more difficult for them to guard. Adding Tobias Harris is a nice little swing acquisition. You can play the 3 and the 4. The team still does not have Danilo Gallinari, still hurt. He's been hurt the majority of the season, but Harris was having a borderline all-star type of season in Detroit, averaging right around 19 points a game. He's a decent rebounder for his size, could be better, but he does bring a lot of versatility, offensive flexibility that the Clippers can use, especially, like I said, without a guy like Gallinari. Boban Marjanovic, he didn't see much playing time in Stan Van Gundy's system because he's not really the most athletic big guy. Known for more of his dancing, but Marjanovic was a stat stud, analytics monster when he was in San Antonio a few years ago, which earned him that big contract in Detroit. But Marjanovic is not exactly the most, fleet of foot guy and doesn't have the most stamina and can't really survive in an up and down press type system. So, where there's a lot of running involved, he's more of a low post big guy. Is that going to work in Doc Rivers' system? I don't think we'll see much of him, but it's there to fill salaries. Now, the 2 draft picks are very interesting. Now, second round picks in the hands of Jerry West are dangerous. I mean, Jerry West is one of the best drafters and evaluators of talent you're going to find anywhere across the entire NBA. So what he can do with a second round pick is dangerous. Now, that first round pick, if the Pistons make the playoffs, is going to be right around, 14, 15, 16, 17, right in that mid to late first round range. If they miss the playoffs, it might be in the 10 range. So 10 or lower. So I say anywhere between 10 and 20 is where you're going to see this pick. And a draft class that's very deep you can get something pretty good in this draft. Like I said, West is a great evaluator of talent, and really it took a lot for Jerry West and Lawrence Frank and those guys to go to Steve Ballmer, a guy who really is trying to politic a new arena. He's really loyal to the guys. He just opened the checkbook for Griffin to realize this might be the best decision for the Clippers going forward. Now, the Clippers have been one of those teams that have won 50 games multiple years in a row. They've been a team that cannot get past the second round. They moved Chris Paul and traded him over the summer, to Houston. And the one would look on the outside and say that, hey, when you trade Chris Paul, it means you're going to keep Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan together. Unfortunately, the way the NBA works is that if you have a no trade clause, you don't really dictate where you go. In this case, one would think that there'd be very few teams in the league that would take on a guy like Blake Griffin's contract, especially with his injury history, as many games he's missed. He's always had some kind of injury that's taken him out for a good portion of games. And it's a very scary proposition for Detroit. Now, if you look at Detroit's end of the deal, they receive, like I said, receive Griffin, receive Willie Reed, receive Bryce Johnson. Really, at this end, the Pistons are 22 and 26. Nothing is working. Detroit's been a hot and cold, up and down team that's missing Reggie Jackson. Now, mind you, Reggie Jackson is not exactly an elite point guard, but Jackson does work very well under Stan Van Gundy's system. So when you have a point guard that runs under the system that runs a lot of the pick and roll, which he's dangerous, and you don't have your main guy doing that, it becomes a problem. For his talent, for as good as Pastor Ish Smith is, he's not very good at the pick and roll because he's not dangerous with the ball in his hands. And at the same time, he's not a very good defender either. So that doesn't mean much of the situation. So adding Griffin, what it does is it solidifies the power forward position. When Jackson does come back, the pick and roll is going to be even more dangerous because you now can infuse the pick and pop with Griffin because Griffin's such a dangerous mid-range shooter. So if you already thought this team was dangerous with Andre Drummond and Reggie Jackson going on the pick and roll, imagine if they start using the double pick and roll situation where they get Griffin to pop or fade out to the perimeter and Jackson can get to the basket or Drummond can go rolling to the rim. That's going to make things dangerous. Also, at the same time, when you trade guys like Avery Bradley and Tobias Harris, it's going to free up time for guys like Luke Kennard, a guy they picked in the first round this year, who's a sharp shooting two guard, not exactly the best defender in the league, and you're sacrificing a lot of defense, but Kennard can knock down shots. And at the same time, this has to be the opportunity for Stanley Johnson to show Pistons management what he's made of. Because if Stanley Johnson, who was a lottery pick a couple years ago, cannot beat out Reggie Bullock, and no offense to Reggie Bullock, Bullock's a very, very good shooter, but Johnson had the potential talent to be a very, very good player when he left Arizona. He hasn't done much of anything, and now in this case, Stan Van Gundy is giving this kid the chance to show what he has to do in the final 30-plus games of the regular season. So the Pistons are now trying to make a playoff push. They added Blake Griffin, have Andre Drummond, they have Reggie Jackson. The sad part is the Pistons have no financial flexibility and no cap space for the next couple of years. So Pistons fans, unless you trade Blake Griffin or Drummond or Reggie Jackson, expect not to have any type of cap space. Now, the guy who hurts the most in this deal is the guy who hasn't played much, the guy named Henry Ellenson, a guy they used another lottery pick on, a guy from Marquette. I'll see him play at Summer League in the last couple of years. Seems like he has talent, but now when you bring guys like Bryce Johnson, you bring Willie Reed, and they already had John Lure on the front line. Griffin's going to get his minutes, so is Andre Drummond. Ellison might be the odd man out, a guy that you could probably ship out to a team that can use a guy who can hit from the perimeter. Ellison won't see much more time because, like I said, they're stacked at the forward position. So this is Stan Van Gundy's final chance to make a playoff push in Detroit because Pistons fans are kind of getting antsy right now. Tom Gore's in a brand new arena. They're not putting people in seats. Griffin's going to help you put people in seats. Now you have to win basketball games. And Van Gundy literally has, 34 games left in the season to fix this problem. The Pistons have to get to the playoffs, and really, at this point, Detroit has to understand that this team is not going to win a championship. But I think getting into games in April and early May is where the Pistons are trying to go. I think they'll be happy with making the playoffs as it is. So, at the end of the day, in Detroit, they have to, if Griffin can stay healthy, they can make a run in the playoffs because the East is really weak right now. John Wall, who's now out for 6 to 8 weeks, has now hurt Washington's campaign, and Washington has to play 500 basketball just to stay at pace. Miami's playing outstanding basketball. Indiana's been playing great. Milwaukee gets Jabari Parker back on Friday, which I'll speak on with the Wall injury in another podcast I'll be recording later on today. And the East, and then like I said, the Knicks and Kristaps Porzingis is telling management, let's go make the playoffs. So you have all those teams, and then of course you have your teams like Charlotte who's struggling, Chicago doesn't have an identity, don't know if they want to tank or they want to make the playoffs, all fighting, like I said, for those spots in the playoffs. Because right now in the East, outside of Boston, Cleveland, and Toronto, you really are looking at 5 spots open with 8 teams that are, 8 teams that are really in that range to make the playoffs. So if you look at those teams and look at what you have going on, you're going to see a different dynamic in the Eastern Conference. So if I want to know, give me your thoughts, give me your opinions. Is this a good deal for the Clippers? For me, going forward for the Clippers, I think that once they know that with Blake Griffin being gone, DeAndre Jordan, Lou Williams is next. What Jerry West pulls off for those two guys will tell you the direction where this franchise is going. If they can convince the Cleveland Cavaliers to give that Brooklyn pickup and other players, they're going to take on Tristan Thompson, which will let Thompson slide right on into the center position. And if you can get the Brooklyn pick, along with your pick, along with the pick that you're going to see from Detroit, that's 3 first-round picks. If the Nets pick can somehow end up in that top 7, if they can get it, you're going to get one of those impact players. You're going to get some good, solid players there. Avery Bradley's contract comes off the books, and the Clippers, they still think they have a pipe dream to get LeBron James, which is not happening. But you have an opportunity to really revamp this roster. Like I said, Pat Beverly coming back, Miloslavljevic having hopefully a full year of rest and getting things together. So I really want to see where the Clippers are going. If they're going to make they're not going to make the playoffs. I think right now in the East, they're not going to make the West. They're not going to make the playoffs. I think that they're going to start sliding down because once you trade. You trade 2 all-star caliber players because DeAndre Jordan's out the door, and Lou Williams, who's the best 6-man basketball. You trade all 3 of those guys, 2 all-stars in the top 6-man in the league. You're not going to make the playoffs. You're just not going to make the playoffs. So Clipper fans just know that even though they're saying they're trying to make the playoffs, they're not trying to make the playoffs, but they're not trying to tank at the same time, which doesn't make sense either. So I want to know your opinion. Give me your thoughts. Check me out on Twitter at NBADT29. Check us also at the website, which is aroundassociation.com. Also, my daily stuff for the Orlando Magic at FloridaNationalNews.com. We want your opinions. Also, at the same time, subscribe to the show, leave comments, pass it on to your friends. This podcast is really easy to listen to because it takes only 10 to 15 minutes to listen to each one of these pods. So I'll record another pod later on today, and we'll be discussing things like Jabari Parker, John Wall, and also some potential trade situations and other things that are going on with the league. Stay in touch with Around Association podcast. See you guys later.